I must say, me'ata leonos miponai. At what point are you going to stop denying to be humbled or to be subordinated before me? So Rashi explained what's leonos. He cited the Targum, no, to be to submit to, and he explains who xeris oni, and the root is the word oni, a poor man. Me'ata leos oni v'shofim panai. I mean, when do you find when do you be humble before me, like a poor man? A poor man, the average poor man doesn't act arrogantly. Why? He has nothing to be arrogant about. A rich man, since he believes has certain abilities, and it's whatever he attributes to, it gives him that sense of entitlement or right, or he believes he's empowered to do certain things. But a poor man who has nothing, you have nothing to boast about, to pride yourself. So if that's the case, what's preventing everything? Because you're not willing to submit. But what's the reason why a person doesn't submit? It's his ego. But if somehow you would diffuse that ego of yours, deflate it, you would submit. So what's always the blockage? The halacha is that if a person has a conflict of interest, he's disqualified as a witness. What's a conflict of interest? Because the person has a conflict of interest, as a result of that, the lens which he sees through, he doesn't see through an accurate lens. That's always a conflict of interest. Ego, whenever the ego gets involved, that's a conflict of interest. I'm not willing to submit. Why? Because, for whatever that because is. But if a person is truly humble and he has no other reason to do what he does only because he really wants to do the right thing, he's going to do the right thing. We find that Hashem said to Adam, don't eat of the tree of knowledge. And he was created, he's the handiwork of God, he was in the Garden of Eden. He had one level of clarity. So why did he eat of the tree of knowledge? Why? If God said no, and he clearly understood God said no, and he didn't have an internal evil inclination, he wasn't inclined to evil. So what drew him to that? Right? What's it all about? So there's a famous word from the Arizal that the Arizal says, there's a concept known as lefum tsar agra. The Mishnah says lefum tsar agra. Based on the level of pain, that will determine the level of reward. Because the more difficult it is, the greater is the sacrifice, and the person is willing to sacrifice to a greater degree, the value of the action has greater value. It's the Mishnah Pirkei Avos. So the Arizal says, before Adam ate of the Eitz Hadas, of the tree of knowledge, everything was black and white. It wasn't a struggle to do the right thing. It was natural. He wanted to be a greater servant of Hashem, to show a greater level of dedication, and therefore, as a result of that, he ate of the tree of knowledge, because now he creates this level of distortion or confusion. Despite the confusion, he's going to do the right thing. That's the result. So Hashem comes and says, "What do you do with knowledge? I told you to do the right thing. I'm not looking for heroes. What are you looking for heroes? Aaron, could you silence your computer? Okay. So Rashi over there, when Chava offered the fruit of the tree of knowledge to Adam, so Rashi says over there, why did she offer it to him? Because she said, what's going to happen? I'm going to die. And after I die, God's going to give you a new wife, create a new wife for you. Something. If I'm not going to be here, you're coming along with me. Rashi cites the Chazal. That was the impetus to offer him the fruit of the tree of knowledge. So the question is, is Adam insane? Because his wife is dying because he made a mistake. Now he feels he has to eat of the tree of knowledge. And what's the thing? And he's also going to die. Because they believe dying meant dying. They're going to die in a short amount of time. I mean, why did Adam agree to his wife as much as she insisted that he should eat? Why did he eat? Because he felt guilty. Because he created a fence. Because he said to her, Hashem said, "Don't touch it," and he never said it. He created that fence. So it's only because he created a fence. That's why she actually violated it. Because the Nachash pushed her into the tree, and he said to her, "See, just as touching the tree, you're not going to die. If you eat the fruit, you're not going to die." So he was responsible for that misunderstanding. And that's why she actually ate. So good, he made a mistake. So because she's going to die, he should die. How do we understand it? It was that Adam had tremendous guilt, but you understand he's not a fool. He's not going to do something which is insanity or totally responsible. So he has to come up with some kind of understanding what would justify a meeting of the Eitzadas. You know what it was? Since there's a concept with the Arizal, since there's a concept of Fumsara Agro, although I'm going to fail, although I'm going to be limited, I'm not going to have a level of clarity any longer if I eat of the tree of knowledge. But you want to know something? Factually speaking, it's worth it. Because ultimately, when I succeed despite the level of lack of clarity, my service to God is a greater level of service. The Fumsara Agra. That was the justification. Just to say, if I die, you're dying, there's no way Adam's crossing that line. But he's come up with an approach that he's able to work out both, satisfy his wife and satisfy God. Because he believed he'll be able to satisfy God, but with the concept that I'll be a greater servant. Because now that it's more complicated, it's not so easy. Because now the clarity has been taken away from me. After it's a das, my service is a greater level of service. About it. Greater is the one who's obligated to perform than one who's not obligated to perform. That's the source. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and so he's
Wait. Somebody's obligated to perform. Why is his service greater than the one who's not? You'd say logically it should be the other way. If you have to do it, you have no choice. If you don't have to do it, and despite that I do it, I should be accredited because despite I have no obligation, I'm doing something greater. Right? I have no obligation. Why am I doing it? Because I'm willing to take initiative because of I value whatever that is. The other person has no choice. He has to do it. The Tosas explains in Kedushin that a person who has an obligation to perform, he has a Yitzhak. He has an evil inclination who's going to try to dissuade him not to perform. A person has no obligation to perform, he has no Yitzhak. Has no Yitzhak because he has no obligation. Therefore, it's more difficult for the person who's obligated than the person who's not obligated. That's how Tosas in Kedushin explains it. Why God Labetzuvosa Mishain Mitzuvosa for that reason. Okay? But that was over here. He believed, but what was really the core of what drove him to this? To come up with this convoluted justification to eat of the tree of knowledge, because he had tremendous guilt. The guilt was that his wife went off the cliff because he created a fence without sharing with her that it was a fence, and that's why she failed. But to commit suicide without any way putting it into some context, there's no way he's doing that. But here, since there is a saving grace, that his level of service will be a greatest level of service, that somehow will get him over the hump.
This was not Hashem's mechanism for having power not be able to see the infusion in him of a stupendous level of arrogance.
No question. I mean, if he would have been humble, a person can't see because he has a cataract. God put this cataract there. Okay? I mean, because he is who he is, being the king. I mean, you see his courtiers said to him, maybe you should reconsider what Moshe and Aaron are saying, because before you realize it, we're going to be history. But Paro wasn't so simple. He's going to buy into this. You know why? It's like employees. The company is losing money, hemorrhaging, and the employee said to the owner, just put in more money. Good money if the bad money. You understand? Because they understand if the company goes out of business, they'll without jobs. The owner of the company, he's putting good money into it. He's not going to waste his money. If it's time to shut down, he's shutting down. Here's the other way. You're telling me I'm close up shop, but you realize if I close up shop, I'm no longer king. I'm no longer King Tut. Therefore, I have a lot more at stake than you guys have at stake. Therefore, he was much more steadfast in his position because he was the king and he believed whatever he believed, although he was stripped almost from everything, proven that he's just a mere mortal. He wasn't willing to accept that, because if he accepts that, it's a rude awakening, which he cannot deal with for that reason. So that's what Moshe said to him. What does it take for you to submit, to be humbled? It's that arrogance, being the king, that you still believe you are who you are, where it's been proven to you endlessly over that you're not who you think you are. As we said, God is the kingmaker. You're not the kingmaker. Find that Yisro was the high priest of idolatry originally, and he became persona non grata, and he was excommunicated because it says he worshipped every deity, and he came to the conclusion that they're all false, and the only true belief is monotheism. That's the whole story with his daughters being the shepherdess, and they were attacked. And the Torah makes it a point, he was Kohen Owen. So the question is, we always say that a person who converts to be a Jew, a person's about Tshuva, you're not permitted to mention his past, because that's called you're grieving him. Because he wants to forget about his past. He doesn't want to be recognized what he was in the past. So unless he's agreeable, you're not permitted to mention his past behavior. Okay? Yet the Torah goes and tells us about Yisro's past behavior. And he's Chosen Moshe. Could you imagine, Lahavdil, if the Pope would become a devout Jew, become a devout Jew? What would it say about Christianity? I mean, he's the head of the church, and he converts. Could you imagine what kind of question it would create by all other Christians? If the head of the church converts, evidently, this is what to talk about. So that's a Kiddush Hashem. So Yisro, being who he was, and despite that, he abandoned it all, and he saw the falsehood in it. That's Kiddush Hashem. Paro, for him to behave, the lessons you take away from this man, you beat the man to a pulp, and he's not willing to submit. What is it? What's the takeaway? If he submits, it's unbelievable. Here, the person who deified himself admits he's a mere mortal, and he's submitting to God. And if he doesn't submit, at the end of the day, what is he going to be? He's going to be pulverized. What happened to Kriyas Yamsuf? They all went down. The greatest army, cavalry, chariot corps, they all went down. What does it say? You can't beat God. That's a Kiddush Hashem. So either way, it's a Kiddush Hashem. If he submits, it's a Kiddush Hashem. If he doesn't submit, also, we're not with Kiddush Hashem. There's so many takeaways. If you're a bystander, it's more easy to see it. Paro, what does it take you to humble yourself? So other people look at him and it doesn't make any sense. You've been nearly reduced to rubble. You're not what you used to be. And you behave as if, a person was a billionaire. Today he doesn't have two nickels to rub together. And he behaves like he thinks he's going to be acknowledged for his wealth, where the man has nothing. That's Paro. It's like amazing. How do you behave this way? Look yourself in the mirror and you see you're not who you were originally. So the takeaway is a phenomenal takeaway. The lesson to learn how a person can delude himself and not willing to come down off his high horse because he can't recognize and admit that that he failed and he's not what he was. And if he would have admitted earlier, he'd be at a different level. If within the first 5 plagues he would have accepted, where he had Bechira, according to Rambam, Egypt wouldn't have been destroyed. He could have had all the glory. It was due that he was his obstinance that he didn't want to recognize that. God had to take him down. So what is he left with? He's left with nothing. But now that he understands what's at stake, that ultimately he's really become nothing. He's not willing to give up, let go.
And Rabbi,
Kanevsky. It's amazing how much he knew, how much Torah he knew, how much, the amount of information he had. It was immediate, literally. And he, in his Mauser on Pesach, he brings certain Medrashim. It says that when the Yam Suf closed on the Egyptians, it said, Arechod. So it's a question what it means. They all perished except up to one. Does up to one means even the one, even Paro went down? Or it means Paro did not go down. Why? Because he had to go back to Egypt to share with them what happened. Because he was the only credible person who could tell them what happened. Otherwise, it's not unknown what happened. So here, the king of Egypt, Hashem allowed him to survive the Yam Suf, that he should tell them that all with our chariot, everything, we couldn't stand up against God. And to describe all the miracles of the sea. See, over there he cites a Medrash. The Medrash says, like you have the case of Yonah and the whale, or this big fish, that he was able to survive in the innards of the fish, which was a miracle. And then afterwards, the fish spit him out on dry land. Paro was under the ocean for 30 days. Hashem kept him there. So when they all went down, including Paro. After 30 days, Hashem took him out, that he should be able to go back to Egypt to tell them exactly what happened. So they all went down. But however, there was one that Hashem allowed to come back, and he was able to survive despite the fact that he was submerged in the water for that period of time. He brings such a chazal. Because if you refuse to send out my people, and he may be I'll bring locust on your boundary. So there's an interesting Gemara in Yuma. The Gemara says in Yuma that until the locust, there were boundary disputes between Egypt and the neighboring nations. Where exactly was the boundary line? When the Arba hit, when the locust came, that settled all the boundary disputes. Why? Because the plague was the Arba will come big vulecha. It's only be limited only within your boundaries. There won't be one locust over the boundary line. So when the locust came, it actually mapped out exactly where the boundary of Egypt was. And that's what he said, big vulecha. That was part of it. It wasn't only the Arba coming, the wave came, but it's big vulecha. It's going to be contained within your boundary. We find there's a famous Rabbeinu Bachya. Rabbeinu Bachya says, I always say it's famous if you know it. The Rabbeinu Bachya says that there's a question, what were the Tzvardeya? What are Tzvardeya? Frogs?
alligator.
Tzvardeya alligators, crocodiles. Because, frogs, okay, you could put up with frogs, but if you have these predator alligators, crocodiles coming on, they devour people. So what do you do? So when it says when Moshe prayed, he said, "Vayor tisharnu," they will remain in the Nile. They're not coming out of the Nile. So Rabbeinu Bachya says it's a known fact that in the Nile there are crocodiles, but it's known the crocodiles do not come out of the Nile. They're not come out onto dry land. Why? Because Moshe Rabbeinu said when he prayed, he said, Bayor Tishar, they're going to remain in the Nile. Because Moshe said they're going to remain, they don't come out of the Nile. When the locust has come, Bigvulecha, exactly, only within your boundary. And that set the boundary line. There was no more ending disputes after that. Miraculous. So by Moshe Rabbeinu, the miracle was not only that the Tzvardeya ceased to be, they never came back on dry land again. That was part of the miracle. Not only they were removed, but how they were removed and never come back again. History of Egyptian history, there's no mention of the Jews have been enslaved in Egypt. That was taken out of the Egyptian history. The pyramids, who built the pyramid? Nothing. Why? Because if it would be recorded in that history, what would it say about the Egyptians? What would it say about the Jews? It's a problem. So what do? You bury it. You bury the information. We talk about revisionists. Just revise history. Either you revise it or you just take it out that nobody should know that it ever happened. The Ramban writes, we find many mitzvahs. Since Ramban in Parshas Bo, this parsha, the end of it, we always see Zechel Tzis Mitzrayim. There's a mitzvah twice a day to mention redemption from Egypt. Many mitzvahs are Zechel Tzis Mitzrayim. Why? Because Hashem never wants us ever to forget about Egypt. It's such a central theme, because Egypt, they were revealed miracles. And over time, what does a revealed miracle indicate and show? That even nature is a miracle. It's considered, it's what? It's a concealed miracle. The sun rising and setting, the tides, it's all miracle. It's God's willing it. Is there a difference if God says the sun should rise and set, or that the sea should split? It's the same thing. There's nothing beyond God's ability. So what's the value of a revealed miracle? You would think that God put the world on automatic pilot. He's not involved. All of a sudden we see there's intervention. So what does the intervention say? God never checked out. God just set the world on a certain order pattern, which is called natural nature. Now that you believe he's not involved, he's coming to tell you he's involved. Otherwise, why are all these events happening? It's out of the realm of nature. To tell you that even nature is God's doing. So since a person is susceptible to forget, therefore there's a mitzvah, always remember what happened in Egypt. Because if you remember what happened in Egypt, you'll always remember that God is always involved, and that's divine providence, continuous. So that's the mitzvah, that's the Torah. That's the reiteration always you teach Mitzrayim. We say Kiddush, Friday night, everything's Zechel Tzis Mitzrayim. If in Kiddush Friday night you don't say Zechel Tzis Mitzrayim, you did not fulfill the Torah obligation of Kiddush. You have to mention Zechel Tzis Mitzrayim. It all goes back to Egypt. The world doesn't want to remember Egypt. Because what does Egypt say? Egypt says that God is the omnipotent one, everything else is false, and the Jewish people are what? Are his people, are the chosen people. The world doesn't want to know about that. They buried it. Nature is nature. Whatever they want to believe, they believe. Do you think every Jew recognized that every one of the miracles? Moshe Rabbeinu understood every miracle and every nuance of the miracle. Within Moshe's words, the way he expressed it, he was expressing God's glory on 250 levels with the subcategories. By we repeating those words, embedded in those words are the 250 miracles. That's why he said it, and we repeat it after Moshe. Those Yoshia, for that reason.
Rabbi, why is it that
The locust, he says, it will cover the eye of the land. Could you imagine? You're not going to be able to see. Could you imagine? The locust is going to come in with such waves that they're going to block the sun, that the sun will not illuminate the earth. It's going to be like nightfall. That's what kind of shield, how thick the locusts are going to come in. The Chi says, you're not going to be able to see the land. And when that level of locust comes, they will eat the remnant of the produce that was left over from the hail, and it will devour even the trees. I always say, we find why did Paro originally spoke like a Beltruva by the hailstones, by the hail. Hashem HaTzadik, what did he do? It stopped, and he did a survey. He found out that the wheat and spelt crop was not destroyed. So what did he understand? that God is not all-powerful. He's not almighty. He's a deity. Because if he was almighty, he would have destroyed the wheat and spelt. But why did God leave the wheat and spelt? You know why? Because he wanted him to have a full security blanket. This was the rude awakening. You believe it's this. I'm going to teach you a lesson. Because now that you believe this is what you're relying on, now when the locusts come, now they're going to eat what you thought was the basis for your security. And that's what Hashem says. I made a fool of him. I made a mockery of him. He thought he understood what's going on. He doesn't see the forest from the trees. He understands nothing. And now they're becoming frantic because now they realize, because they thought they had something. Could you imagine a person is holding on to something? Then he realizes that it's a boa constrictor and he's going to be strangled with it. And when he was holding it, he thought he's holding onto a trunk of a tree. Then he realizes that this is the basis for his destruction. Here, if this was your confidence, I'm showing you, what is miftocho? Asher Som Hashem miftacho. Bitchu Hashem. Source of one's security is God himself. And if it's not God, nothing's secure. Because everything is fickle. It's here and then it's gone. I don't want to record this. Many years ago, there was an article